For thousands of years, humans have gazed into the heavens, pondering the nature of existence, asking, what is God? How did life begin? Are we alone in the vastness of the cosmos? Are there people on other planets? Did God create man in the image of God? Or did man create God in the image of man? Is there any meaning and purpose to life? Or is it all a cruel cosmic joke? Humans have long stared into the abyss, and the abyss has stared back. Answers and explanations have ranged from the religious and supernatural to the magical thinking of modern-day scientists. Theologians have attributed the origin of life to the hand of God, and in the Judeo-Christian Bible it is said we should not worship the stars, for they are the domain of other peoples. Most modern scientists reject God and instead embrace a theology of miracles, preaching that life came from non-life, from lightning bolts striking a random mixture of chemicals in a supernatural organic soup. An idea so absurd and laden with magical thinking, it is the equivalent of discovering a computer on Mars and claiming it was randomly assembled in the methane sea. The theory of the organic soup is a silly, childish myth. Only life can give rise to life. Only DNA can give rise to DNA, the machinery of life. If life were to suddenly emerge on a lifeless desert island, we would not pretend it was randomly assembled in an organic soup, or created by the hand of God, but that it washed ashore or fell from the sky. The earth is an island, swirling in an ocean of space, and living creatures and their DNA have been falling from the sky and washing to shore since the earth's creation. The first creatures to appear on Earth came from other planets. For 800 million years after our planet's creation, the Earth was continually bombarded by gigantic meteors, asteroids, and mountains of frozen ice, with the first evidence of earthly life, highly complex living creatures, appearing immediately thereafter. As only life can produce life, then the first creatures to appear on Earth came from other planets. Most scientists agree the ancestry for modern microbes and all of life, including woman and man, can be traced backwards in time from Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, Australopithecus, ape, monkey, mammal, including reptile, fish, plant, insect, amphibian, and so on. Ancestry which ultimately leads to the very first creatures to appear on Earth almost 4 billion years ago, a time when our planet was continually pounded with meteors, asteroids, and oceans of ice, cosmic debris which contained the seeds of life, actual living creatures and their DNA. The seeds of life flow throughout the cosmos. Our ancestors were visitors from the stars. Other than the hand of God, there is no other logical explanation for the origin of life on this planet. Although championed in Dr. Ron Joseph's best-selling text, Astrobiology, and supported by considerable scientific evidence, this theory is quite ancient and was proposed thousands of years ago by the Greek philosopher Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras argued that the seeds of life swarm throughout the cosmos. However, another Greek, the philosopher-scientist Aristotle, rejected the views of Anaxagoras, embracing instead the magical absurdity that life originated from non-life, a concept also referred to as biogenesis and spontaneous generation. Aristotle's theory of spontaneous generation was later embraced by Darwin and most modern scientists. For thousands of years, scientists believed that maggots were spontaneously generated from rotten meat and garbage, and that flies came from chemicals secreted by decaying meat. This was the prevalent scientific view as to the origin of life until 1680, when Francisco Redi proved that only life can produce life. Redi placed decaying meat in a sealed jar and proved the meat remained maggot-free. Even so, scientists, including Darwin, continued to champion the magical belief that life can be created from non-life. Thus, it was claimed that bacteria are spontaneously generated from nutrient-rich chemical reactions, and life began in a warm pond of water filled with organic residue. According to the Darwinians, this random miracle of chance occurred only once, non-life giving rise to life in the form of a single microbe, which gave birth to all subsequent microbes, which then randomly evolved completely by chance into complex animals, leading through random variation and natural selection to Darwin and modern man. Yet this view was also disproved in the 1800s by Louis Pasteur. Pasteur demonstrated that bacteria are produced only from bacteria. Only life can produce life. Pasteur boiled a nutrient-rich organic soup, killing all bacteria present, and poured this bubbling brew into a bottle with an open neck or an S-shaped neck, which would prevent the bacteria from falling into the flask. The organic broth in the open neck bottle was soon brimming with bacteria. However, the organic soup placed in the S-shaped bottle remained bacteria-free, proving again that only life produces life, and bacteria are generated only from bacteria which, in this case, fell from the sky into the open bottle. The theory of spontaneous generation had again been totally discredited. Fearing these experiments proved that life was created by the hand of God, the scientific community blinded themselves to alternative explanations, and in rejecting God, instead attempted to play God and embraced the supernatural. They simply modified their theories, arguing that life could be created from non-life if nutrient-rich organic material were exposed to ultraviolet radiation, lightning bolts, and the rays of the sun.
Dr. Baumann, I learned a great deal from you at the university about the violet ray, the ultraviolet ray, here in this machinery. I have gone beyond that. I have discovered the great ray that first brought life into the world.
Oh, and your proof?
Tonight you shall have your proof. I am going to turn that ray on that body and endow it with life.
And you really believe that you can bring life to the dead?
That body is not dead. It has never lived. I created it. I made it with my own hands. Look, it's moving. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's moving. It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. Oh, in the name of God. Now I know what it feels like to be God. Oh.
Like Dr. Frankenstein, numerous modern-day scientists have tried to play God, using electricity and ultraviolet rays in the hope of creating life from non-life in specially brewed, nutrient-rich organic soups. It is this recipe of miracles, they claim, which explains how life began. Many scientists believe that the Earth's oceans were originally extremely hot, and the atmosphere was made of gases such as ammonia, hydrogen, methane, and water vapor. Thus, it was proposed that energy from lightning and ultraviolet rays caused complex chemical reactions which gave rise to life in the form of simple microorganisms. In a famous series of experiments conducted in the 1950s, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey boiled water and exposed a mixture of methane, ammonia, water vapor, and hydrogen gases to electrical discharges and ultraviolet rays for a week. All those simple amino acids were created. No tigers, lions, bears, or bacterial cells were produced, and not even a fragment of DNA, the machinery of life. Despite hundreds of millions of dollars used to fund experiments conducted in the most scientifically advanced laboratories in the world, every single attempt to create life from non-life, or even a fragment of DNA, has miserably failed. Only life can produce life. Only DNA can produce DNA. And there is absolutely no evidence to support the myth of the organic soup. In fact, there was no organic soup. The early Earth lacked all essential free ingredients for the creation of life and its DNA. In fact, the early Earth was a poisonous, toxic planet devoid of oxygen and plagued by erupting volcanoes which released oceans of burning lava and highly toxic gases including hydrogen chloride, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. The entire concept of a life-generating organic soup is in fact an ignorant delusion. Consider the incredible complexity of the simplest of bacterial cells. Thousands of complex molecules are precisely jigsawed together to create its outer membrane, the components of its cytoplasm, and the intercellular machinery that enables the cell to extract and use energy to self-nourish and reproduce. A journey into the heart of a single-celled organism reveals an incredible complexity of the machinery of life. Multiple components and structures busily at work simultaneously in a massive, coordinated, highly choreographed effort to maintain the functional integrity of even the simplest of creatures. The fantastical idea that these molecules randomly and spontaneously organize themselves to create a complex living cell is nothing more than a delusion based on a belief in miracles. Consider the incredible chemical complex composition of a single strand of DNA, that ultimate information-bearing micromolecule. DNA is the machinery of life, containing all the knowledge, information, and blueprints for creating, through complex chemical reactions, all the proteins which make up every unique component of every unique cell in the body. DNA is composed of hundreds of thousands of individual nucleotides which are laddered together, forming base pairs alongside a backbone of complex sugars and phosphates. It is the arrangement of these nucleotides which contain the codes for creating every component of every cell of every species which has ever walked, crawled, swam, or slithered across the earth. Each strand of DNA is entwined together, forming a double helix, and may consist of hundreds of thousands of base pairs. For a single cell to divide or grow requires DNA to unwind and to recreate itself, and to generate the proteins that make up the cell and its inner components. DNA also manufactures different types of RNA, which makes a copy of the code and snips out the silent genes called introns. RNA transfers this information to yet another DNA-constructed protein, the ribosome, which translates these codes and creates the specified proteins. The incredible molecular complexity of even a single strand of DNA, the complex chemical reactions involved in its expression, a process involving several steps, and the assistance of the almost equally complex RNA, renders impossible the fantasy that these molecules, the machinery of life, were randomly assembled in an organic soup. The myth of the organic soup is based on a theology of miracles, that chemicals can be randomly mixed and jigsawed together to fashion a living cell or its DNA. In fact, even when fragments of DNA are stirred together, they do not self-assemble. Consider, even the simplest of single-celled bacteria, Carcinella, requires 160,000 base pairs of DNA and 182 genes in order to live and function. However, this bacteria, Carcinella, cannot live independently and depends on a living host, a silent insect, to survive. Thus, if there was an organic soup, it had to randomly create, assemble, organize, and then spew out over 182 genes comprised over 160,000 base pairs. This is the equivalent of discovering over 180 computers on Mars and claiming they were magically assembled in the methane sea when elementary particles were randomly mixed together. However, even with 182 genes, the resulting creation could not have survived unless provided with a living host with thousands of genes. The incredibly foolish notion that the random assembly of chemicals can create life is a delusion and a myth based on ignorance and magical thinking. Only DNA can create DNA, and DNA contains all the information necessary for life. Other than through magic or the hand of God, the first living creatures on Earth had to come from other planets. It is generally believed that our solar system was created when an ancient star depleted of hydrogen fuel exploded and became a supernova. Naturally, all planets circling that star would have been shattered and mountains of debris and oceans of water cast into the wilds of space. It is believed that the shattered pieces of this ancient star collapsed into great cosmic clouds of dust and gas, which eventually gave birth to dozens of new stars. The children of the star included our Sun, which was surrounded by a disk of debris, which began rotating around it. Around 4.6 billion years ago, material from this rotating disk began to flatten out, then collect and clump together. Thus, from the remnants of this dead star, the Earth and the other planets were formed and began to orbit in the same direction around the Sun. For the next 700 million years, mountains of stellar debris continued to bombard the Earth and the other planets. The mass of the Earth began to grow in size, becoming denser and hotter, melting together and spewing out toxic gases. During this period, a huge planetary body struck the still molten Earth, casting out a huge chunk of debris which became the Moon. The huge gash in the planet would later become filled with oceans of ice falling from space, the watery remnants of the ancient star system that had been destroyed. Our solar system is still surrounded by dense clouds of comets composed of frozen water and ice. The outer edge of our solar system is ringed by the Kuiper belt, which consists of meteors, asteroids, and icy comets. Even further out circles the Oort cloud, which is believed to consist of shattered oceans of ice. The Oort cloud is the source of comets and water-bearing meteors which rain down upon the solar system, delivering water to the surface of all the planets, including the Earth. And where there is water, there is life. The new Earth, however, was initially without oceans, water, oxygen, or an atmosphere. Instead, the entire Earth was a blazing inferno, continually melting from the heat generated by the mountains of debris pummeling the planet. Oceans of ice and watery comets also rained down on the Earth. It rained water from space for 100 million years, slowly cooling the raging infernos and filling the cratered planet with oceans, lakes, and rising seas. And where there is water, there is life. Indeed, even a simple droplet of water contains myriad life forms, many of which could easily survive, frozen for hundreds of millions of years, only to come back to life. As the oceans continued to rise, and by 3.9 billion years ago, living creatures had begun to proliferate upon the surface of the planet, which had cooled and solidified sufficiently to retain evidence of their passage. These creatures were structurally complex and appeared on Earth immediately following a 700 million year bombardment from space. These visitors from the stars were found in rock formations located in West Greenland and the nearby Aquileia Island and are believed to be almost 3.9 billion years in age. According to the scientists who made these discoveries, these were not the first life forms to appear on Earth. What type of creature could withstand a journey through space and take up residence inside rocks? An incredible number, including archaea, cyanobacteria, and blue-green algae which happily thrives deep within rock and stone, even under sub-zero temperatures. Blue-green algae are believed to be among the first to take up residence on Earth, and in 1961, algae were discovered in a meteor from space. Bacteria rapidly proliferate, and within a few weeks, if unhindered, they could easily cover the entire planet with a thin sheet of bacterial cells. However, many species of bacteria prefer to live in colonies. By 3.5 billion years ago, the first colonies from space formed stromatolites. Stromatolites are comprised of silicified microorganisms, including photosynthesizing cyanobacteria, such as blue-green algae. Algae form stromatolites in shallow water by trapping, binding, and cementing together grains of sediment. Algae were not alone. By 3.5 billion years ago, a vast array of prokaryote microbes, extremophiles, cyanobacteria, and archaeas had begun to overrun the new Earth, leaving their fossilized remains immortalized in ancient rocks. These 3.5 billion-year-old fossils look identical to modern-day bacteria and remarkably similar to microfossils discovered in an ancient meteorite over 4 billion years old, about the same age as the first microfossils found on Earth. Thus, the first evidence of fully formed, complex, single-cellular life was present from the very beginning, as the Earth was still being formed and while debris pounded the planet. As debris continued to rain down upon the toxic volcanic Earth and its rising seas, all manner of complex single-celled and then multicellular creatures proliferated and multiplied, covering the Earth with life and their DNA. Thus, by 3.5 billion years ago, the planet was crawling with life. Even though the Earth was still largely toxic, convulsed with volcanic activity, and all the necessary elements for creating a nutrient-rich organic soup were completely absent. This means our ancient ancestors journeyed here from the stars.